The Crimes, a Smithco original fiction podcast. The Christmas edition, episode 9. Hello, and welcome back. This time we're investigating Freddy once again. In the last episode, we discovered that Freddy had passed away, and we were informed that unless we had a sample of DNA, then we would not be able to make sure that it was Freddy. So while we didn't have a sample of DNA from Freddy, we did track down his uncle. So, you were Freddy's uncle, were you? Yes, we weren't very close. Obviously I'm sad to hear of his passing. But you know, we weren't, as I said, we weren't very close, but you know, I did see him once or twice. Unfortunately, when he was 20, his parents ran away, and they left him, because they said, well, for maybe 2 years, when he was 18 and 19, they still talked with him, and you know, when he had a job, but then he lost his job because of his financial difficulties, and well, he tried to come home, but they thought they just left. They'd sold the house, and they'd left. The mortgage, unfortunately, hadn't been paid off, so the bank were chasing the debt. You know, the money, there'd been a drop in the housing price, so they hadn't been able to pay off all the mortgage. So the bank was just sort of chasing this debt, and they couldn't get it. So Freddy was really the next in line, but unfortunately they couldn't prove that the parents passed away, so he didn't get anything. So I met him around that time, and then he'd set himself up. He got himself a job, and he moved away. But you know, so yeah. I would be very sad, yes. So you offered us a piece of your DNA. Yes, I did. And we actually had it sent off to allow, and we compared it with the DNA on file for the man who was found in Hawaii. And we did discover that it was as expected. It was Freddy's DNA. Yes, it's terrible. However, in Hawaii, we met with police who had recently detained a man who had begun to confess to crimes after he'd been found attempting to rob a shop using gun violence. Now we talk with Chief Inspector Ryan, who tells us a little bit about the evidence. Obviously, I can't tell you everything. I mean, it's classified information, but I can tell you a certain amount. So, basically, he's admitted to multiple crimes after we tried to use gun violence in a shop. Unfortunately, the storekeeper was, you know, he was quite a, I mean, this is off the record, but he was quite a violent man. So he actually had a gun in the shop for these purposes, and obviously, most people wouldn't actually end up being in the situation where they're being robbed, but for him, it was basically a dream come true. He began to shoot at this man's friend, and he actually killed him. The man then shot the shopkeeper, and also the shopkeeper's assistant, who he thought was actually working with him. Unfortunately, while the shopkeeper, you know, was armed, the shopkeeper's assistant was not. So this man was up on a charge of murder and all these things. So basically, he decided to turn in his evidence, and well, basically now we have charges against multiple people, and it's led to the arrest of 10 different people. So that managed to get his sentence reduced. And one of the things he told us was basically he essentially gave us a biography of the past 2 years that he's been working. So it was essentially every single crime. And yes, we originally had no hopes for this thing, but he actually had very particular circumstances. In fact, we wouldn't have thought that we would have been able to identify that Freddy. It is Freddy. You did identify him, right? Yeah, Freddy. We wouldn't have originally known that it was Freddy that he'd killed, but the fact was that he had actually informed us of particulars, which we tracked down. So Freddy was in fact He had said that he wanted to get out of the country, that he wasn't happy with the state that the country was in, and he had been kind of essentially conned, he was saying, about what the country was like. So he said he wanted to get out of the country. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough money, but he had struck a deal with these people that he would essentially man with the pilot one of the planes which was going out, which was obviously filled with drugs. But unfortunately, in the end, he was actually they discovered that he was planning to essentially send them in because at the port, and that way he'd be able to escape if they were stopped. And that was an issue because while they may not have been stopped, they did not respond well to this, and he was sent out. He was essentially ordered. He was ordered to be killed, and we know this from this conversation, and it's really so. This is what we discovered. So you're saying that he was stabbed by this gang? Yes. Unfortunately, the man won't actually be serving the expected years. He'll only be serving something like 11 years in prison for all the crimes he's committed. So don't you think that Freddy's family will be pleased with this? You don't think Freddy's family will be pleased with this? Personally, I don't actually think it's a very good system. It's not. In my opinion, it's not a very good system because I understand the evidence is valuable, but it doesn't always work because, for example, this man has killed multiple people, and his evidence isn't actually that reliable, if you know what I mean. We have managed to get to 10 to arrest 10 people, but that doesn't mean we'll get convictions. We've only got one conviction so far. So in the end, this evidence is more of an indication. It's like, well, we know who to go for now. We know who to investigate. But it isn't always good enough to convict. And that people say, oh, well, surely that means we just need to get juries and judges to take it from. But then the fact is, he could be lying, and that's the point. We don't actually know for sure that people are, guilty of these crimes. So we know that he is. So how do you know who he is? Well, we we don't actually tell people. Our policy is we don't actually tell people who's throwing them in. So we try to get them to confess then. It's a very bad system in my opinion, but that's what we do. And so everyone sort of popped him in the hat of stabbing them as well. So that's really it. That's what happened to Freddy, a man who originally had left his home country in the middle of the night to go to America and had met up with a friend. And in the end, he passed away in Hawaii when the gang stabbed him to death after he tried to escape America. Thank you for listening to this series. This series is a Smithco original fiction podcast. This means that this did not actually happen. However, it is told in the way of true crime. So if you want to click a video, it's the second series. Might come out. If you like it. If you don't like it, then we might have a second series. But basically, we gauge our likeness on if you sort of I guess you could say if it's viewed. So if it's viewed like a lot, then yeah, we'll come out with a second series. Unless you say in the comments, oh, it's got a lot of views, but I don't want a second series. In that case, then we would not come out with a second series. But you know what I mean. If it is viewed a lot, no one says they don't want a second series, then we'll be coming out with a second series, hopefully. Anyway, so basically, I'll see you guys, later then, I guess. Yeah, this has been The Crimes. Thanks for listening. Once again.